you're not really sure what you're gonna do. Willpower often does not work. You can't do it through willpower, you have to do it through
하면 된다라는 말이 있죠. 적절한 동기부여와 의지력만 있으면 못할 게 없다는 말입니다. 그런데 의지력은 아무 소용없다고 주장하는 세계적인 베스트셀러 작가가 있습니다.
when the alarm goes off, you're not really sure what you're gonna do. Willpower often does not work.
어느 대기업 회장의 운전사가 어느 날 회장에게 질문을 합니다. 회장님, 어떻게 하면 돈을 벌 수 있습니까? 회장님은 이렇게 답합니다. 돈이 어떻게 벌릴지 계속 생각하세요. 이 말은 200만 원을 들고 주식의 어떤 종목에 투자하라 라는 말처럼 구체적이고 속이 뻥 뚫리는 답은 아닙니다. 하지만 여기에 분명 일리가 있습니다. 오늘 영상의 답을 먼저 말씀드리겠습니다. 성공하고 싶으십니까? 그렇다면 성공만 생각하셔야 합니다. 그거 봐, 내 이럴 줄 알았어 라고 말하는 것이 내가 말했지 성공한다고 보다 쉽기도 합니다. 그래도 완벽한 사람이 어딨어 라고 말하는 게 완벽하게 일을 해내는 것보다 쉽습니다. 퍼센트로 따지면 성공하기 위해 90% 이상 노력은 했지만 100% 성공만을 보고 뛰어든 건 아니죠.
Elko is an entrepreneur from Amsterdam. He's 38 years old and he as well has struggled with weight. And he's always had a story in his head that was actually planted in there from his mom. His mom told him when he was a teenager that they are the kind of people who always are going to struggle with weight, always struggle with food. He actually also had the idea in his mind that he was going to be able to potentially willpower his way to holding off self-destructive behavior until about his 40s, 50s, or 60s. But then at that point, it would just go all downhill. Because of his bad eating habits, he actually struggled to sleep. And so one night he was up all night struggling to sleep and a thought came to him. What if I just went back to nature and just ate clean? What would happen if I did this for the rest of my life? Rather than thinking, what if I did this for like 30 days? Or what if I did this for a year? And all of a sudden he has like this vision, this picture in his mind of himself in his 90s, totally vibrant, totally healthy. He sees himself with his kids, his grandkids, and at that moment, he just makes the shift. From that moment, he saw what was possible, and so he just committed to it. He's one of the healthiest people I know, hasn't touched any bad food since then. He lives under the mantra, 100% commitment is easier than 98% commitment.
이 기준에서 보면 진짜로 사업을 하는 사람과 그렇지 않은 사람을 구분하기가 쉬워집니다. 벤자민은 말합니다. 진짜 성공한 사람들을 여럿 만난 결과 a point of no return experience, 올인할 수밖에 없는 경험을 다들 했다고 합니다.
And one of the questions that I asked the wannabe entrepreneurs and the actual entrepreneurs was, have you ever had a point of no return experience? And almost all of the wannabe entrepreneurs said no. A lot of them hinted to the idea that they hope to have that experience one day. Almost all of the entrepreneurs said yes. Not only were they entrepreneurs, I asked lots of authors, professional people at all scales, and they all said yes, I've had them.
배수의 진이라고 하죠. 어떤 일이 주어지면 그 일을 해낼 수밖에 없는 옵션밖에 없고 내가 할 수 있는 100%를 쏟아내는 것을 말합니다. 진짜 사업가와 사업가 지망생의 차이가 바로 여기 있습니다. 100%를 다하지 않으면서 100% 비슷하게 했다는 것은 같이 사귀자고 해놓고 이 사람이 마음이 바뀔까봐 다른 이성을 찾을 준비를 하는 것과 같습니다. 중요한 건 그 다음 이야기입니다.
So my follow-up question was, well, what happened after that experience? Actually, I was interested, what was the point of no return? What created that shift? Then my next question was, what happened after? But I was kind of surprised. What often created a point of no return experience was making a financial investment in the goal. So I interviewed like a 17-year-old entrepreneur, for example, and his point of no return experience was when he and his friend, they were both seniors in high school. They put their money together, their savings, they invested $10,000 into a huge shipment of shoes because they wanted to sell shoes. When a huge truck came and offloaded basically a mountain of shoes, he said he realized that at that point he couldn't go back. Basically at that moment, his identity shifted.
올인할 수밖에 없는 상황에 놓여서 100% 다하는 것만으로 끝나지 않습니다. 성공을 원한다면 그에 맞는 일을 해야 합니다.
He said at that moment he realized that he was running a company. And from that moment forward, he acted from that leadership role. So he put himself in essentially a position where he had to move forward. That's why it was a point of no return. He's a totally different person. How you do anything is how you do everything. But things like fad diets, a 30-day diet, trying something for a year is not a way to change your behavior, because changing your behavior has to be first a shift in identity. When you shift your identity first, then the behavior that is up here where your goals are is in alignment with your identity. If you keep your identity down here and you're trying to act up here, then you're actually acting in conflict with how you see yourself.
이렇게 하는 이유는 이것저것 신경 쓰느라 결정을 하지 못하고 100%에 헌신하지 못하는 사람이 되지 않기 위해서입니다.
I eat it this time, do I not eat it? And that right there, that mental tug of war, is called decision fatigue. Basically, the idea of decision fatigue, it's another word for willpower. It means you haven't yet made a choice, and you're not actually sure what you're going to do. And because you're not sure what you're going to do, often the situation wins. That's one of the most consistent things that's found in social psychology, is that generally people are the byproduct of their situation. And the reason for that is because people are not decided. Michael Jordan actually had a very powerful quote. Michael Jordan said, "Once I made a decision, I never thought about it again."
아까 벤자민을 통해서 말씀드린 100%가 98%보다 쉽다는 이야기는 사실 하버드 비즈니스 스쿨의 클레이튼 크리스천슨이 한 이야기입니다. 이분은 자신이 세운 원칙에 100% 헌신했습니다.
In my first job with a consulting firm in Boston, about a month after I started, the project leader that I was working for came to me and said, "Clay, just so you can plan on this, on Sunday at 2 p.m. we've got a big team meeting because we got to put together everything we have for a big meeting next Monday with the client." And I said, "Oh man, Mike, I got a problem here. That is, I made a commitment to God when I was 16 that I wouldn't work on Sundays." And Mike just went bonkers. And he said, "This is a company where everybody, if they have to, works when they have to work." And I said, "Well, I observe that, but I don't want to be that kind of person. My faith, I just don't want to work here." He was so mad, and he went off. Came back about an hour later, calmed down a little bit, and he said, "Look, I talked to everybody else, and we'll do it on Saturday at 2 p.m. And I said, "Oh, Mike, I got a problem because I made a commitment to my wife." And Mike went off the deep end on that one. If you're married and you take a job with this company, you got to know what goes first. And I said, "Well, the reason I'm in trouble is because I know it has to come first, and I can't come to this meeting on Saturday." He said, "Everybody works on Saturday." And I said, "But I can't." Anyway, he went off even madder, came back an hour later, and he said, "Do you by chance work on Fridays?"
에이, 적당히 열심히 해도 다 먹고 살아요. 그렇게까지 안 해도 다 됩니다. 하시는 분들 있을 겁니다. 하지만 100% 마음을 모아 결정한 사안에 집중하지 않으면 적당히 마음먹은 만큼 누군가에게 끌려가게 됩니다.
Psychologists have found that on average, people have about 50,000 thoughts a day. And Nate said that about 40,000 of those thoughts were about food. He couldn't stop thinking about it. And that's essentially the nature of addiction. And he was very addicted to food. And that's why the Michael Jordan quote is so important. That once you make a decision, you no longer have to think about it again. I don't want to have to think about this ever again. And once he let that go, then all of a sudden they were able to be exactly who they wanted to be.
이 이야기는 마치 평생 한 여자랑만 살아야 해. 한 신만 섬겨야 돼 라는 말처럼 많은 옵션이 없이 마치 선택의 자유를 빼앗아가는 것처럼 들립니다. 하지만 그렇지 않습니다. 정반대죠.
Once you're able to actually make a decision and cut off the alternative option by committing 100%, then all of a sudden their mind was completely free and they felt so aligned with who they were that they started doing things that they had been procrastinating for years. Elko started a business that he had wanted to do for 3 years. Within a week of having that vision of seeing himself, he had already started. And since then, he's done all sorts of things that he's always wanted to do. Ever since he's been able to let this thing go, he's no longer avoiding the behavior that he hates, and he's now pursuing the life he loves because he's so aligned with who he is and where he's going, and because the story he's telling himself is based on that future, not based on, well, this is why I am the way I am. Then all of a sudden, he could be more courageous.
If I had just that one time said, just this once, in this particular extenuating circumstance, I'm going to break my standard and do it, is my whole life has been an unending stream of extenuating circumstances. And I realized that I need to stand for myself. Whatever my standards are, it's easier to keep that commitment 100% of the time than 98% of the time.